Hello, everyone. On today's podcast episode, I'm going to continue where I left off, and explain to you the reason why, I talk about duality. The reason why, I made the last episode is to tell you this is that atheists confidently open their mouth and say God doesn't exist, right? But yet they don't have a full understanding of what existence really is. Most people do not have a full understanding of what existence really implies. They don't have a full understanding of the world. When they don't have a full understanding of the world, that's when they keep making claims that God does not exist, It is impossible for God to exist, blah, blah, blah. It's because from their point of view, their point of view is so narrow. Their understanding of the world is so narrow and small. They're incapable of realizing that. They don't truly understand what existence really means. They don't truly understand what non-existence really means. Because they don't truly understand what these words mean. They can say words randomly. They can say words like, God exists, God doesn't exist, there's no way God exists. They can say these words, confidently. Just like a liar can confidently make claims and promises. You know what? A liar can make claims and promises. They make promises to you because they know they'll never be able to keep it. Since they can't keep it anyways, why not make the largest promises to you? They've already decided not to keep their promises. So they can make all the promises in the world because they know at the end of the day, they'll never be able to keep it. And that's how it is with, atheists. They can say God doesn't exist all day because they don't have a full understanding of what God is. They don't have a full understanding of what existence is. They don't have a full understanding of what nothing is. And they don't have a full understanding of what something is. They don't understand the concept that they're stating. Because they don't understand the concept that they're stating, they just make random wild claims without any evidence. They know for a fact that it's impossible to prove that God doesn't exist. But yet they still make claims that God doesn't exist. Why? Because they don't understand how life works. Just like a flat earther can confidently say that the earth is flat. Why? Because they don't understand how the world works. When you don't understand how the world works, it's easy for you to just make random claims. It's part of the whole duality of the world. The smarter someone is, the more they know how, the more they feel dumb. The dumber someone is, the smarter they think they are. The dumber someone is, the smarter they think they are. The smarter someone is, the more they feel dumb. Do you know why? The smarter you are, the more you realize that the world has a lot more smarter people than you. You start to realize things. Your awareness increases. Your ability to rationalize things increases. Your ability to understand how the world works increases. And with the greater understanding of the world, it's easier for you to start to realize that the world is far more complicated than you think. When you start to realize the world is far more complicated than you think, it's harder for you to, confidently say that you're the smartest person in the world. Because intelligence works off a gradient. There are people who are dumb and there are people who are smart. And then there's God, infinite intelligence. And then there's infinite intelligence. Humans will never get to infinite intelligence. And a smart person knows that. The smart person knows that they will never be the smartest. There will always be someone smarter than you. There will always be people smarter. But a dumb person is the equal and opposite. Because they're too dumb to understand how the world works. They can confidently say that they're the smartest person in the room. They're always the most confident people around the world. They're always the most confident people around you. Because they're too dumb to know that they're not smart. The dumber you are, the smarter you actually think you are. And the smarter you are, the dumber you think you are. That's how life works. Atheists can confidently claim that God doesn't exist Because they're not smart enough to know that God exists. They're not smart enough to rationalize that there's a possibility that God exists. It doesn't cross their mind to rationalize that God exists. Because they're not smart enough to know that God exists. They can confidently claim that God doesn't exist without any evidence, without any proof. Because they don't even know what existence truly means. They don't know what non-existence truly means. They don't know what something truly implies. They don't know what nothing truly implies. They have no full understanding of the world around them. Because they don't have a full understanding of the world around them. They don't know when they're doing something wrong. It's like a child. Some children do not know when they're doing something wrong. It takes time and effort to teach them what, that doing certain things will harm them in the future. And that's how atheists, that's the mind of an atheist. They're incapable of realizing that they're making a mistake. They're incapable of realizing that there's something wrong with that mindset. They don't fully understand what God is, but they can confidently claim that the Christian God, that Yahweh, doesn't exist. They can confidently claim it because they're not smart enough to realize that they could be wrong. It doesn't cross their mind that they could be wrong. And that's the problem with life, Smarter people are incapable of realizing that they're smart. Dumb people are incapable of realizing that they're dumb. This is why the world is filled with so many problems. Dumb people take positions of power and never listen to the smart people around them, and then ruin the lives of their country. Because they will never listen to, since they never listen to smart people because they think they're the smartest person in the room. They're the confident people. Run away from people who pretend to be confident. The more confident a person appears, the more arrogant a person is, the dumber they usually are. A smart person never pretends to be smart. A smart person is the one who's aware that he could be wrong, that he could be making a mistake. The dumb ones are the ones that always, confidently claim that yes, we know for a fact how this works, without the slightest care in the world that they could be wrong. Without the slightest care. Dumb people can ruin your life. If you hang around dumb people, you'll never be able to change their minds. Because they already think they're the smartest person in the room. They think they're smarter than you. Because they think they're smarter than you, they'll never listen to your opinion. While a smart person knows he's not the smartest person in the room. Because his intelligence tells him that there could be people smarter than him. He uses intelligence to realize that there could be people smarter than him in this world. That he may not have it all figured out yet. And so guess what he does? He starts taking the opinion of everyone around him. And then after taking their opinion and their perspective, into consideration, he makes his decision based off their advice. After taking their advice, you'll start to think, should I take this advice? Is this advice worth taking? Is this one not worth taking? That's the mindset of a smart person. A smart person plans the future. A dumb person does not. A smart person, every time, he hits a setback, it looks for ways to to fix things. A dumb person does the opposite. It acts as if he already has it all figured out. And then ruins his life anyways. And that's the problem with life, Dumb people will never listen to the opinion of others. They will never take the advice of others, no matter how smart that advice is. No matter how great the advice is, a dumb person will never listen to it. Why? Because they're too dumb to know that they're not that smart. They're not smart enough to know that they're not smart. Because they're not smart enough to know they're not smart. They will automatically ignore all your advice. They're the most closed-minded people around. They will automatically ignore everything you say because they think they've already have it all figured out. Because they believe they've already have it all figured out, They will never listen to you. And that's what makes them dumb. They're incapable of changing with their environment. They're incapable of changing with the information they receive. They don't change. They can't change. And if you can't change in life, you can know, one of the very traits of life is the ability to adapt to your environment. If you can't adapt to your environment, you won't be alive for long. This is why the dumber people die in life and the smarter people live. The smart people live a long life, the dumb people die randomly. From car crashes, from drugs, from suicide, from X and Y, from guns, from fights, from gang fights, from X or Y. The dumb people die quickly, while the smart people live a long life. Because smart people know they could be wrong. Dumb people are bullhearted. It doesn't cross their mind. They're too arrogant. It doesn't cross their mind that they'll ever be wrong in life. Because it doesn't cross their mind that they'll ever be wrong. They'll rush ahead towards a cliff and fall off it, without the slightest care in the world that there's a cliff in front of them and that they should be careful. Even if everyone tells them to be careful, there's a cliff ahead of you, be careful. They will never listen. You know why? They're too dumb to realize that there are people smarter than them in this world. So because they believe there's no cliff in front of them, because they believe there's no bottomless pit in front of them, they will jump. They'll run ahead and jump into the bottomless pit. And there's nothing you can do about it. You have to be sane to know that you're sane. While you're insane, you're incapable of realizing that you're insane. Someone who's insane is incapable of realizing that they're insane. Someone who's dumb is incapable of realizing that they're dumb. And someone who's smart is incapable of realizing that they're smart. The smarter you are, the more you realize there's smarter people around you. So you start to feel dumb. The dumber you are, the more you think everyone else around you is dumb. And you're the only one that's smart. So if you have the mindset that you're the smartest person around, be very careful. Be very careful. You're the dumb one. There's a high chance you're the dumbest one around. Smart people do not think they're the smartest people around. Smart people are smart enough to know that they could be wrong. They could be making a mistake. We all make mistakes in this world. A smart person knows that they make mistakes. When a smart person leads a company, they have plans and backup plans, and even backup plans of their backup plans. And if when all fails, they still have a backup plan for that as well. That's the mindset of a smart person. It never just, makes one plan and sticks to it. They always have a backup. Another backup for that backup. And then another backup for that backup. That's the mindset of a smart person. Why? Because a smart person knows they can make mistakes. A smart person knows, even if they have everything perfect, they do everything perfect, it doesn't mean the world will work the way they want. Things do not always happen the way you want it to happen. Things change. You cannot control the future. You can only control yourself. Because you can only control yourself, you have to make backup plans for your life. Backup plans upon backup plans. And if someone comes out and gives you an advice that makes everything that makes you question everything you know, take that advice and see whether it's true or not. Do not just ignore it, because you could be wrong. That's the mindset of a smart person. They know that they could be wrong. But a dumb person has the equal and opposite mind. A dumb person will never thinks they're wrong at anything. It doesn't even cross their mind that they could be wrong. And that's why they're wrong. That's why they're dumb. The smarter you are, the more you know that you could be wrong in life. The more you make plans. The dumber you are, the less likelihood you know that you're dumb. And the less plans you make in life. You make one plan and you think that's the only plan you need to make. It doesn't even cross your mind that, that plan is so flawed that it'll fail instantly. You're too dumb to know that your plans, may not work out well for you. So you make plans without making any backups. And then when the plan backfires, you blame everybody else but yourself. Because you're the smartest one there. Since you're the smartest one there, obviously, the problem isn't you, it's everyone else. So dumb people never take responsibility for their actions because they never think there's something wrong with them. While smart people always know it may be, it's their fault. They weren't smart enough to figure out everything in life. So when things fail, they have to blame, who can they blame? They can't control the world, they can only control themselves. So they can only control themselves. The person to blame, the common denominator in the problem is them. They're not smart enough to figure out how things work before they failed. They weren't smart enough to figure out how things work before it failed. So the problem is them. While the equal and opposite is true for dumb people. It's not them that's dumb. It's the world that failed them. They blame the world instead of blaming themselves. They'll, instead of saying they made a bad plan, they'll say the plan was perfect. It was the world that ruined it. I made a perfect plan, but the world ruined it. That's the mindset of a dumb person. I made a perfect plan, but the world that ruined it for me. Nothing could have gone wrong if not you. They start blaming everyone else around them. They start blaming the people around them for the problems. They never blame themselves because they're too dumb to know that the problem is not the world. The problem is them. They can't control the world. They can only control themselves. So if you can't control yourself properly, do not blame the world from your problems. You are the common denominator in all these problems. So if your life is a mess, don't blame the world for your problems. Your life is a mess because of you. God didn't make your life a mess. You made your life a mess. Blame yourself for your bad choices in life. Don't blame God. But the truth is, no matter how much I say this, a dumb person will never listen because they think they're smarter than me. Because a dumb person thinks they're smarter than me. He will never take my advice seriously, no matter how wise the advice is. No matter how smart the person is, no matter how smart the advice is, no matter how smart the plan is, the dumb person will never, follow the plan because they think he's smarter. The dumb person will never take your advice because they think he's smarter. He has a better advice. He has a better plan. When that plan backfires, guess who will blame? He won't blame himself. He'll blame you. He'll blame everybody else but themselves. So this is what you need to be careful of. Insane people do not know they're insane. Insane people are incapable of realizing that they're insane. And that's just how life works. And that's why I say I don't debate atheists, because they already, they're not smart enough to, if they're not smart enough to realize that God exists on their own, the only thing that'll probably change their minds is, using fallacies and illogical arguments. The only way to trick, the only way to turn an atheist into a theist is through manipulation and trickery. They're not smart enough if they're not smart enough to realize that God exists on their own, if they're not mentally capable of realizing that God exists on their own, then there's nothing you can do to truly change their mind. There's nothing logical you can do to truly change their minds. It's like trying to turn an insane person into a sane person using logic. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. If they're too illogical to think logically, then they're incapable of realizing what logic is. Every logical argument looks illogical in their eyes. And that's how life works. You can't turn the same person sane using logic. You can either use, maybe you can use tools, like biological tools, blah, blah, blah. Or you can use like drugs, whatever method, there are people, there are psychiatrists who give, administer drugs to people who are, psychotic, insane, blah, 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 and all these things. So it's when someone is insane, you can either treat it with drugs or, You can't treat it with words. You can't use logic on someone who's illogical. You have to figure out a different way. You can either figure out, you can either change them. You can either change their hardwire, change their physiologically, as in change their physical bodies until they become smarter, or you just medicate them, or just avoid them completely. You avoid an insane person until they figure out how to become sane again. There are people, and being insane is not a permanent. I don't believe being insane is a permanent trait, as in it's not a permanent state of mind. At least not for everyone. Some people that were born insane. Some people that were born without a brain. People that are born without a brain, you can already tell these are insane people by default. There's no brain for them to have any sanity. There's no brain for them to have any sanity. So how can it be? How can you ever use words to make someone sane? It goes back to what I said earlier. Intelligence isn't something you can use words to to increase. You're either born intelligent or you're not. So likewise, you're either born sane or you're not. You're either born someone with Down syndrome or you're not. You're either born with sickle cell anemia or you're not. You're either born with a brain or you're not. You're either born a human or you're not. No matter how many books you read, no matter how many words you've heard in your life, no matter how many people speak to you, you'll never be able to turn an insane person into a sane person. You can never turn someone with Down syndrome into Einstein. You can never, no matter how many books a person without a brain reads, will never be as smart as Einstein. He doesn't have a brain. No matter how many schools, you take someone without a brain to. No matter how many schools a person without a brain has attended in his life, has gone to in his life, in the end, he'll still be dumber than someone with a brain. There are brick walls in this world. They're bottlenecks. A brain is a bottleneck. If you don't have a brain, no matter how many classes you attend, you'll still be dumb. If you don't have a brain, no matter how many classes, whether you go to Harvard, you go to Yale, you go to any of these Ivy League schools, no matter how many classes you attend, there's no brain for you to absorb the information. There's no brain there. And that's the brick wall of life, is that you're either born intelligent or you're not. Schools do not make you intelligent. They're incapable of making you intelligent. Because words cannot turn a sane person into an insane person. And words cannot turn an insane person into a sane person. You're either born sane or not. So and when you and what I'm trying to say is that sometimes things happen to you, you get through arguments, fights, or if you're someone who goes through, if you're like a soldier who's been through wars, right? There are times where your mind goes through, psychological shock. During that period of time, you may end up becoming insane, but that's true, but it doesn't mean you always be insane. So what I'm trying to say is, don't look down on people who you think are insane, because it could be, it could be an illusion. They could just be going through shock, or maybe something happened to them in the past that that messed their mind up. So whenever something happens, the mind is incapable. The mind is too it's too stressed out to think logically. If you're someone who's gone through abuse, torment, or any sort of psychological stress, during the period of time when when you're suffering from the shock, or when the memory comes up, your mind will not be fully there. You're suffering from moments of insanity. So not everyone who's insane will always be insane. I really don't believe it. People who are sane, things can happen in their lives that could turn them insane. For example, someone with a brain could end up getting, a surgery that removes their brain, or get into an accident and then half the brain has to be removed. So they'll no longer be as sane as they used to be. So things happen, Drugs can ruin your mind as well. There are signs that show that, doing drugs affect your brain. It actually warps your brain. So people who do drugs, you just know what you're doing. You're making yourself more and more insane as time goes on. You're destroying your ability to think. Doing drugs destroys your ability to think. And the more your brain, the more your brain warps, the more insane you become, the less you realize that you're insane. The more your brain warps and tears and rips apart inside that head of yours, the dumber you are. And the dumber you are, the smarter you start to think you are. So the dumbest people in the world, will never know they're dumb. The drug addicts that have ruined their minds, from drugs, will never ever be able to realize that the drugs has ruined their minds. Because they lack the thinking power to know that they're slowly becoming insane. They lack the thinking power that to realize, the intelligence to realize that they're getting dumber and dumber. The dumber and dumber you are, the less intelligent you become. The less intelligent you become, the harder it is for you to realize that you're not intelligent. So the dumbest people in this world think they're the smartest. And the smartest people in this world think they're the dumbest. And drug addicts are always the smartest. They always think they're the smartest people in the world. They always think that, the drugs they do are the healthiest thing alive. Yet scientists always prove them wrong. Every single drug kills you. Every single drug ruins your life. All these drugs ruin your life. They destroy your mind and destroy your body. But, when the drugs have already ruined your mind already, it's hard, when the drugs have made you dumber, it's hard for you to realize that these drugs aren't doing anything for you. Your mind isn't smart enough to realize the drugs are harming you. Your mind isn't smart enough to realize the drugs are harming you. Because your mind isn't smart enough to realize the drugs are harming you. You keep taking the drugs thinking they're helping you. So it's like endless, it's a psychological problem. The more you do drugs, the dumber you become. The dumber you become, the more you think you're smart. The more you think you're smart, the more you do drugs. You keep thinking the drug is making you smarter, but the truth is the equal and opposite. The drug is making you dumber. The dumber you become, the smarter you think you are. The smarter you think you are, the more confident you are in doing the drug, because you think the drug's helping you. The drugs make you dumber, and then you start thinking you're smarter, and the drug makes you dumber, and you think you're smarter. The drug makes you dumber, and you think you're smarter, and then you die of shock, heart attack, stroke, X, Y, organ failure. This, you die before the age of 50, and life goes on. So you're the cause of your own problem. As a drug addict, you're the cause of your own problem. Well, that's it for today's podcast episode. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.